Welcome back, friends. It's another episode of The Mindful CEO. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel, here with our other handsome co-host, Aaron Hendon. Hello, I almost called you handsome. Hello, handsome.
You did call me handsome. That's funny. I was looking at your mustache, Chris, and I was a little bit freaked out because I'm going to a Halloween party tomorrow. We're going as Morticia and Gomez Adams.
Yes.
So I'm going to shave down to my mustache and dye it. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to wind up looking just like Chris next week. He's going to think I'm spoofing him.
Well, it'll look good on you, I'm sure.
I hope so. We'll see. Because I'm talking at EXPCon next week, and I'm like, oh my God,
good.
I'm going to be mustachioed for that phenomenon. So we'll see.
Love it. Can't wait.
We'll see how that turns out.
I'll let you introduce our guest today.
Yeah, great. So Jim is a person that I came across through some of my internet searches of who should be great guests on our podcast. And Jim filtered his way in, as great guests will do, as they filter themselves into the show. And, we don't have a deep background of relatedness, but other than when we were talking, he has created this, I don't know if it's a system, Jim, what would you call it?
Yeah, it's
a system. Called Septemics, and it sounded just spot on for the kind of things that we do on the show. So, Jim, with that, I'm going to just let you introduce yourself, and let's just get into what is Septemics and how can it empower people in being mindful CEOs. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Well, I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique. And together, they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty that any person has that has anything to do with human beings can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
Wow. That's wild. All right. So how did you discover this? Tell us about that discovery.
Okay.
Fascinating.
Okay, well, really the story begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, at the time, I thought I was going to be engineering physical things, such as airfoils, motors, electrons, things like that. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because it is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people, don't understand the boss, don't understand the employee, don't understand the business partner, don't understand the wife, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And this book resolves that problem across 35 axes.
Wow.
So to make a long story short, I had a lengthy career as a human development engineer, working one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description to bring them to greater ability, greater mental clarity, and so forth. And using engineering tactics, engineering principles, engineering approaches. This is not counseling, it's engineering, but it's working with the human psyche. So as I was working with my clients, of course, all of my clients improved as a result of our interaction, but incidentally, I started to notice pretty early on that I could predict the outcome of the session. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times over my 40-year career. So I would see that the client was at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And that the client, as a result of our interaction, would go to the next level up that I had observed on that scale. And every time that happened, it verified my hypothesis. You just have to realize the clients didn't know anything about this. I was extremely tight-lipped with my clients. I would only tell them the date and the time of the session, and that's about it. I didn't, even if they asked me directly, I wouldn't tell them anything, because I worked with Socratic dialogue. And the whole idea of Socratic dialogue is asking the right question to bring the person to an epiphany of his own.
Mm.
And that happened with my clients over and over and over and over and over. But also I use biofeedback. So obviously I had a big advantage over Socrates. So
I just had shadows, but yes.
So by 1995, I had about 32 scales that I had simply observed and written down. There's no theory of septemics. This is all direct empirical observation. So also around that same time, I had a particularly difficult client who I was pondering, and I realized that that client was at a level on one of the scales that I had not previously observed. Now, this was at the time a 6-level scale, but by then I absolutely knew it was correct. From decades of usage, it was always correct. But I realized, there's another level in here. Now, as soon as I saw what this level was, it was obvious to me where to insert it into the 6-level scale. And when I inserted it into the 6-level scale, making it a 7-level scale, the scale then manifested mathematically, meaning all of this data jumped out at me. And it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, which is a whole body of data. So I suddenly had all of this data relative to this scale, and it all interlocked like a Chinese puzzle. This was very mathematical. Now, you have to realize, for those of you who are allergic to mathematics, I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. So math is a very real thing to me. Now, the whole point of math is you start with an equation or a formula and you coax data out of it. That's how Einstein found E = mc². Everybody in the math and physics community knows exactly how he did it. There's no mystery to that. Okay? So when you have data present themselves, that is a mathematical phenomenon. So I looked at this, I said, whoa, I don't know what the hell this is, but whatever it is, it has to be natural law because it's got math embedded in it. Like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence. So I then said, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are also actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients in making notes. So, knowing what I was looking for, I inspected all these other scales, and in a short period of time, each of them went to 7 levels. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 7-level scales, all of which had mathematics embedded in them. And I said to myself, this looks like a new subject to me, because having gone to school for 28 years, I never saw anything like this. Now, there are things that use scales, but not in a cross-referential way like this. We have 35 axes.
Yeah.
So then I thought, I could go from helping people by the hundreds which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so people can learn it. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft of the book was finished in December of 95. And I then sent it in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. They had different responses, but distinctly positive responses. And that told me that this was exactly what I thought it was, which is a new subject that people would understand and would really help people. So I then spent the next 25 years of my life working on this book.
Wow.
And the reason for that is, first I had to discover the phenomena, and I pretty much told you how that happened while I was working with my clients, although I did find 3 more scales as I was writing the book. Then I had to take this data and I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. Because simply having the scales is not enough. So that took 20 years.
Wow.
Now,
I feel like there's a couple of things, Jim. I wonder if I can pop in here for just a sec. I mean, the first thing that's there for me is mad respect for your ability to stay in the inquiry of your own life's work for so long. I know, I think sometimes on the CEO side of the spectrum, Aaron, like we can get like, where's the result? Like, let's get there faster. And for something to take 25 years to reveal itself would be like, oh my God, like hurry up already. So mad respect for your patience and your curiosity to keep you in that game. I'm wondering kind of like where, for our listeners, people who are sort of straddling that fence of performance in business and also wanting to stay mindful and connected to the source of all things. How does your work, how does Septemics help us balance these two worlds?
Okay. So first, let me tell you in a general way how this is beneficial to people, to all people. I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or the beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up these scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. More importantly, just finding out where you are or where another person is on any scale is by itself inherently enlightening and beneficial. Every time you correctly spot a person on any scale, you have a realization. You say, oh, now I see why my parents couldn't get along. Or now I see why Joe and Mary are fighting all the time, or whatever it is. Or now I see why Fred is not performing on his job. See, you have an insight. That's one of the ways you know you found the correct level. Mm-hmm. And finally, once you know the correct level, you can improve that person, whether it's yourself or another, by moving them up one level at a time. Because you have to see that these 7 levels are the gradients for the corresponding 35 areas of life. Now, let me explain something. Some people say to me, what book is your book like? And having gone to school for 28 years, I have to say in all candor, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. But each one of these scales is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet. And that table, each of the 35 of them, is very similar to the periodic table of elements. But instead of it being for physical matter, it's for the corresponding subject. And if I may, I'd like to tell you what those 35 subjects are, and then you'll see exactly what material is in the book.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
That would be that was my next question. So that's perfect.
Okay. So there were 24 individual skills, and they mostly apply to an individual. and 11 group scales, meaning they mostly apply to a group. So these are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. And let me give you an example. I mentioned the scale of motivation. In dealing with people, motivation is one of the most important things to know. Let's say you have an auto dealership, right? And you're hiring a new salesman. And you find out that guy is money motivated, which is level 4 on that scale. That's good. That's what you want. You want him out there trying to sell those cars so he gets his commission. But on the other hand, let's say you're going out with some girl and you're thinking about getting married, right? Wouldn't it be smart to know the motivation? Why does this woman want to marry me? I mean, isn't that a reasonable question? I'm not saying to ask the partner. I'm saying get the book and look it up. Mm-hmm. So let's say you look at you decide she's at level 1. Level 1 of that scale is love. Well, that's a good reason to marry somebody. She wants to marry me because she loves me. Let's set the date. But maybe that's not what happens. Maybe what happens is you say, now that I think about it, I can see that she wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini, I fly my own Learjet, I have a 60-foot yacht, I live in a $15 million condo, and I have $8 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation. That's the money motivation. Now, you just hired a guy who's money motivated because you want him to sell your cars. But do you really want to marry someone who's marrying you for your money? Maybe and maybe not. There are some guys who'll say, well, okay, she wants to marry me for my money, but I love this girl, so I'm going to marry her anyway. But maybe that won't happen. Maybe the guy will say, this woman is a gold digger. I don't want to marry her. I want to marry somebody who loves me, not my money, see, and break up with her. Now, in that second case, you might think he's going to be upset about that, and you would be wrong. He's not. He's going to be relieved. He's going to say, thank you, Chris, for showing me the scale. I just dodged a bullet.
Right.
See?
All right. Well, so hang on. Let me dig in here for a second. Okay. So level 1 is love, and level 4 is money motivated. Right. So there's 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 on that.
That's
scale.
right.
Okay. And you said that moving people up the scale is beneficial.
Yes.
Okay. So 4 is higher than 1.
No, 1 is the highest level.
Oh, 1's the highest level. Okay, got it. Okay, so they go the other way. Okay, good. All right, good. So then that totally groovy there. So, but then you could take the time with the woman who's at a 4 and look to see, okay, what's 5?
Well, you wouldn't want to move it to 5 because that would be going down the scale.
What's 3? Sorry, what's 3?
You don't want to move it to 3.
Sorry, right, got it. Golf.
Yeah, and that, see that, I don't know that would benefit you in that context. In either of the contexts that I gave you, it might not benefit you. Sometimes, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients. Very often, the person would come to me and be in a relationship, get tremendous benefit from it, and break up with the spouse because they moved up these scales. And in a sense, they're leaving the spouse in the dust. Now, Sometimes they would get to say to the spouse, you should go to this guy, he could really help you. And sometimes that happens, but sometimes it doesn't. See? So it will result in the relationship breaking up because this person is moving up and the other person is not. So that happens commonly. But the person is not upset about it. He's happy because he's seeing everything from a higher perspective. His life is better. It's clearer. It's more meaningful to him. See?
Completely clear. If my love, the woman I love, isn't willing to go from 4 to 3, that makes complete sense.
Right.
Right. But if I could then start a conversation to move her from 4 to 3, from 3 to 2, 2 to 1, that would be even better. Yeah.
Well, it certainly would be better for her to go up the scale. That is unambiguously true in all cases. But 3 is status. This is a person who's motivated by status or fame. See, that might actually wind up ending your relationship. She might say, well, okay, I'm not interested in money, I'm interested in fame. So she wants to marry somebody who's famous. See, and she might dump you. So
yeah, totally.
You see, that could happen. Now, 2 is duty. See, now, if you could get her up to duty, do you really want somebody who wants to marry you out of a sense of duty? That happens sometimes,
Yeah.
where the family says, we want you to marry this person because it's good for the business.
Completely clear.
Yeah,
that's clear. So, but I get. I mean, so on one hand, and I think this is probably also universally true. You can't move other people. People can move themselves. You can't move other people. So, just from the context of, but that world, right? In this theoretical relationship that we've built, there's that acknowledgement of, okay, this is where that person's at in their life right now. That person needs to work on themselves because they're stuck in this world of chasing money. They are not even at the level of chasing status, or I don't know, even chasing's right, but they're in that world. And me being clear about what I'm looking for. I know that right now we're at different levels. Go work on yourself or not. Go do you. And I'm empowered in that because I'm not going to spend my time in that.
Let me address that, because once you know the actual level of a person, you can move them up to the next level, because that is the next thing for them. It's not hard to do. So let's say a person is at level 4. If he tries to get to level 1 or 2, he will fail because it's too steep a gradient. It's not the next thing up, but he will be able to get to level 3. And when he stabilized the 3, he could then try to get to 2. Now, I had a whole career of moving people up these scales, even before I knew I was moving them up these scales. Because I was doing this for decades before I even got the idea of septemics.
Right.
I think there are a couple of things I'm present to here. One is clearly this is a body of work that would really require someone to read the book. So everybody listening, you should just go get the book so you have a sense of like the scope of what you could do with this. I kind of feel like as I read the book, a whole world will open up for me about not only how can I move myself up a level at a time. If I'm a coach working with clients, how can I help them get to the next level at a time? So I think there's that piece, which is like the scope of that book is beyond what we can get covered in this. And I think you're doing a great job, Jim, of really outlining like how much, how helpful and how much work there is to really support people moving up these scales. The thing that I keep coming back to that I'm interested in, maybe for, I don't know how much longer, we could probably go for hours, but I'm interested in your thoughts based on these scales, your thoughts about how the world is behaving and how do we move the world up these scales. I think so. Those of us as a mindful CEO who are interested in some type of social change, social impact, like, hey, let's not just make a profit because we can make a profit. Let's be mindful about how we move the species of humans up the scales. What do you see, Jim, from the work you've done? How do we do that?
Okay, well, this is about moving a particular person, or in some rare cases, a group, up to the next level. So when you get up to the societal level, in a sense, it's not applicable because it has to be done on a smaller level. Now, most people who are in this field know that you have to improve people one at a time. You see all the time that catastrophes are caused because they try to move whole societies. Okay, you can't do that really. Now, if you get into, for example, the scale of government, it does talk about levels of government where you can move from one level to government to, but that takes decades or generations.
Yep.
But let me explain something that makes this really beneficial. I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Most people have problems, difficulties, situations, dilemmas. They don't know how to fix it. And 99% of the time is because they don't know the gradient. These 7 levels are the gradients. So let's say you have a person who has a problem with control. I'm giving you the 7 levels of control. And you see, since there are only 7 levels, it's not hard to work with. Let me give you an example. Let's say most people have kids, and most kids have trouble in school. So dad sees that Junior is getting bad grades. He says, Junior, come over here, let me show you something. And he opens up the book to the scale of scholarship. So Junior's 13, he can read this. So he looks at this, he says, scale of scholarship, never heard of anything like this. The dad says, yeah, where are you on this scale? Guaranteed Junior is going to want to know that because he's having trouble. Now what's going to happen is in a matter of seconds, he's going to find a bracket. He's going to say something like, well, I can see right away that 1, 2, or 3 don't apply to me because I'm not a good student. That's the top of the scale. See? So he got it down to 4. And the dad says, well, look, you can get this exactly. Why don't you just read the text and you can get it? So Junior is going to want to do that because you're opening a door for him. So he reads it. You can help him as a tutor. He comes back to say, well, I can see now that I read it, I'm at level 5. No wonder I'm having trouble. That's near the bottom. That's not so great. And of course, needless to say, I detail in excruciating specificity what each of these levels means, what it looks like, what it's like being in it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's once you read it, you say, yeah, that's me, right? So then the dad says, we can move you up to level 4, and then you'll be a better student. He says, you can? Yes, Junior, it tells you in the book how to do that. So dad works with Junior, following the directions, and I tell you with specificity how to make someone a better scholar. There's no ambiguity about this, okay? And Junior works with dad, and when the next report card comes out, instead of getting B's and C's, he's getting A's and B's, you see?
Yeah, now, that's great. I love it.
All of this was done without invalidating the kid, without sending him to remedial classes, which are going to make him feel stupid, without hiring a tutor, without spending any, it's all just dad with the book and the kid. And this applies to pretty much any situation that involves human beings.
Great. I had this picture as you were describing that every time a new baby is born into the world, they're given a copy of your book and they say, here, just hold on to this. And I love that it sounds like, and what I'm hearing from it is like, it really honors the intelligence of every human. Like this isn't like you need to see the yogi for the real answer. You don't need to go to the wise guru to get your answer. We are all source energy in human form. We all have the intelligence. We just need someone to show us. So if you're tapping into a Fibonacci sequence, or you're tapping into, in this case, into these divine natural law 7 scales. You're just like, just look at the thing and you'll know because you're intelligent.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah, let me tell you something. Let me just finish.
Yeah.
That this book, some version of this book has been out for 28 and a half years. Okay. Since I released the first transcript of. So I've been watching people respond to this for 28 and a half years. That's a long time. I have a big database on this. Basically, what happens is when people look at this, it's like putting on eyeglasses and looking at yourself in the mirror. You say, oh, I missed the spot when I was shaving today. See? Oh, I can see I have spinach on my tooth. I didn't see that. Or looking at another person, right? Like, for example, some months ago, I met this beautiful blonde. I'm a single guy. Beautiful blonde, right? She was very interested in me. So we're going through the usual thing, you know, tell me about yourself, what's your job, what hours do you work, where do you live, blah, 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 you know. And as we're doing this, I'm listening to her answers, and I'm seeing she's low on this scale. She's low on this scale. She's low on this scale. And after a while I said, what am I, crazy? No, thanks. I dismissed her. I said, pass. She was shocked. I was probably the first guy in her life who did that to her because she's so beautiful. You know, beautiful, elegant, stately blonde. So she said to me, who do you think you are? I did not say to her, I'm the guy who knows septemics, because it wouldn't have meant anything to her.
Right.
But most guys would have jumped right in, see, and been regretting it as a train wreck 3 months later. Now, of course, when I was a young man, this data didn't exist. I hadn't discovered it yet. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes and got involved with people I shouldn't have been involved with, and I wound up regretting. Now, for me, that cannot happen, does not happen, will not happen, because it's very easy for me to use this. So for me, finding somebody at a level on one of these scales is as difficult as drinking water. Okay.
It's a great recruiting tool too. If I was thinking about building an organization that was equally yoked, that was able to see eye to eye about, like, if I'm a CEO and I'm hiring somebody, it's the same example you're giving with the lady. It's like, I can see who this person is for my organization. What scale are they on? And is it going to be a fit? Because, you know, we talk a lot about in business how costly the wrong hire can be. I can totally see very practical application for how you're describing this inside of a hiring situation too.
Yeah.
I don't know, Aaron, if you had something to add.
Yeah, well, one insight and then a question. Well, the insight is, I mean, just the way that would work in sales is pretty obvious to me. Like where in the, you know, in the relationship scale is this relationship that I have with this potential client, that I can then look at and see, okay, the relationship is here. And then I can also hear their needs and hear their, you know, because sales is really meeting people where they are. And then looking to see what it would take to that person's at this point in interpersonal relationships. And I forget all the different categories, but there's clearly, you know, what they can hear in terms of the possibility of the solution that I'm offering inside any equation in any purchase decision-making process. I'd be able to hear where they are in all the different levels. And that's sort of the question I've got is, given, you know, this is no one's singular, you know, there's not one single category that matters more than another, that there's where you are. It's a holographic kind of phenomena, right? Where we've got to see where they are in all these different categories because they relate. Like if my relationship with my son is at a 7, I don't even have the wherewithal to have him open the book because I'm at a 7 in relationship with regards to him. So I've got to deal with that because I can't he won't listen. There's no relationship there. So I've got to deal with that. And then, so there's no real opportunity to get it to scholarship with him or get him interested in scholarship from my presenting it because the relationship scale is off. But it's you got to get all the different particles lined up before they really matter. Again, if you just go back to your blonde, where that relationship was at a level at which you couldn't contribute anything particular to her in her wit in discovering the scale yet. The relationship was too nascent. There was no ground there. But if I'm married 26 years, I've got a background of relatedness with my wife that's distinct, that we can look to see, okay, this is consistently a problematic area in our relationship. And I could be responsible for where I'm at in that scale and where she's at in the relationship scale. And we can look to see what we need to do to build that up so that we can then begin to look at the other particles. That's how that works, right? There's we haven't discussed yet the holographic or the connectedness of the web of all these different phenomena, but they've got to be connected in that way. Yes.
Some of the scales are very closely connected to other scales, and not all in the same way. Some of them are connected longitudinally. Some of them are connected latitudinally. There's a variety because every scale is unique, and some of them fit together and some of them don't. But let me tell you something, because business is a lot of this discussion. There are a couple of scales that are directly valuable to anybody in business. One is the scale of management. And that scale dovetails with another scale that is inherently important, which is the scale of human ability. And as far as finding the right fit, the scale of human ability is absolutely vital. And it solves that whole problem of getting the right person in the right job. And in many cases, it means getting them in the right level of the organization. And that's very important and meaningful as far as explaining why some succeed and why some don't succeed in any type of a business or managerial area. The other thing I have to say is that context is very important. For example, I talked about the scale of scholarship. But there's also a scale of literacy. Now, literacy has 7 levels. People think, well, literate or illiterate. No, there are 7 levels of literacy. And what people call literate, traditionally, I call level 4. And illiterate is level 7. Well, there's 5 other levels. So if I'm hiring a housekeeper, that person doesn't need to be as literate as William F. Buckley. Right, that's not what's important. That person has to be able to function to clean my house, see? And there's some people I get that they do a good job and I keep them, and others don't do a good job and I get rid of them. But literacy is not a component of it, Right. I'm not going to use words like colossal or gigantic. I'm just going to say big. Now, I had clients who came to me from Europe whose first language was not English. And I was able to successfully deal with them because I was cognizant of the language situation, that I had to communicate to them in a way to make sure they understood what I was talking about. Because most people who speak English as a second language, they don't understand things as well as we do. So you sort of have to be alert. And I was alert to that, and therefore was successful. So it depends on what the context is. What are you trying to do? So, for example, the scale of basic purposes. If a person is at level 1, that person's goal is transcendence. That person doesn't care about money, about sex, about fame. They want to transcend. These are people who become monks, who become rabbis, who become gurus, okay? People like Jesus and Gautama and Lao Tzu, okay? So if you have some guy who's on Wall Street, those two people are going to have very little to discuss, if anything. I mean, they might be able to tolerate one another, but, let's say you have the dad owns a business, he wants Junior to come into the business. Well, if Junior's basic purpose is to transcend, he doesn't care. That's what happened with Francis of Assisi. His father was a rich merchant. he wasn't interested. He went off and founded the Franciscan order because he was interested in transcendence. In a Christian context, he would say going to heaven, something like that. I mean, if you were a Buddhist, you would articulate it differently, but it's still the same purpose, which is to transcend. So you have to look at what's relevant. And in those two scales, the management scale and the scale of human ability, they dovetail in a very specific way that's not obvious at all. It took me years to figure out. And it really helps you to know where to put a person in an organization or whether or not to hire him at all, and what to do with the person when he shows up at your door.
It reminds me, Aaron, of, we like to talk about music here and the Grateful Dead and jam sessions, and to know what scale we're playing in. It's not like one scale is better than another. It's just what kind of music do you want to play? And if you know what music we're playing in this jam session, then we can put ourselves in the right context of the right scale, and we can have a jam session. That's kind of how I'm hearing this a little bit, Jim. Like if we're talking management and the context is management, then we're going to have a jam session in management, and we're going to make sure that we have everybody who knows how to play that scale called management. Because otherwise you get like off notes. You get people who don't know how to play that scale, right? Like the harmonics. I wish I knew all the scales. The blues scale and the other scale, the fancy scale.
I worked as a professional musician for decades.
Okay,
nice. I had a reputation, and I would be called in very often to do a gig. Never met these people before in my life. No rehearsal, nothing. But they knew that I could do the job. All I needed to know was the key.
Yeah, right.
And they didn't even have to talk to me, because in the music business, they have hand signals. Okay?
Nice. Yeah.
This means the key is C.
Aaron, this is our shortcut, Aaron.
This means the key of F. This means the key of G. So,
okay, I like it.
All right. So if they didn't do it gratuitously, I just say, what key? They just say, okay, we're in G. That's all I need.
I love that.
Great. That's great. That's great. And then you could begin to get, okay, so I got my group management's all in the right place there. And then we're looking for the hires. We're looking at motivation and their relationship scale and their motivation scale and their purpose scale, so that we make sure that those three things are all aligned and consistent with what we're up to. And given we're in management, that's where we're at in terms of our interest in maximizing the production and the fulfillment of the individuals in the organization. So we're interested in the scales that they're each on in relationship to that.
Right.
And then we can look at what the scale of the of the group to see if we all in harmony. Are we?
I love this. Yeah.
We can begin to hear where this breakdown in this particular aspect of our performance is off. There's an off note in there. There's this story about Ray Charles, being able to hear, in a group setting, who's playing the wrong note, and you can begin to see that if you're tuned into this. And this sounds a tuning phenomenon. Like you can really begin to hear, once you're aware of it, you can begin to hear, no, there's an off note in whatever, in this aspect of the company, there's an off note in there, and that we can go to begin to investigate, what why they're off. Right. And maybe to determine, okay, well, in the scale of abilities, we're asking them to go from, 5 to 3, and that's not going to happen. So we just need to look to see what does it take to get them from 5 to 4, or decide it's not worth the effort to get that person from 5 to 4 and replace them with someone who's already at a 4 or already at a 3.
Right.
Great. So good. I love this. Jim, I can totally see the application of this across all kinds of things like management, marketing, selling, marriage. It's fantastic. I can't wait to dive in. I'm clearly going to order the book. As a coach, I'm always trying to think, where are people at? How do I crack the code of something? And it sounds like this book is full of code cracking, because you just get to look at here's where they're at. It's not right or wrong. It's just, this is just where they are. So this is what you're dealing with. And so I love it. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I think this is I love how what's the word? Objective, it seems, right? It's not like, how do I feel today? It's kind of a little bit, it's cleaner than that. It's cleaner. It's like,
Right.
Well, it's the math.
math.
It's math.
It's math.
So, well, just because math, it's either adds up or
math.
it doesn't. There's one right answer. It's not up for debate. It's not variable in any way. It's either this or it's something else. It's the only two choices. It's binary. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Very.
So let me give you a couple of things. One, these data are precise, specific, and accurate. So you can rely on these the way you would rely on a GPS, the way you would rely on a slide rule or a computer. It's accurate, okay? So these data are like the Pythagorean theorem. If you have a right triangle, okay, you can always use the Pythagorean theorem 100% of the time, you're going to get the right answer because it's natural law. There's no situation where the Pythagorean theorem doesn't apply. Now, if there's no right triangle involved, well, it's not applicable. But anytime a right triangle is in there, you use it, or you can use it, okay? So let me give you an analogy to tell you how friendly this is to people. Let's say, Chris, you invited me to your house to see your garden. I don't even know if you have a garden, but if you did, and you invited me over to look at your garden, I would come over because I'm into gardening, right? So I go in your garden and I say, oh, Chris has peonies, nasturtiums, chrysanthemums, hydrangeas, tulips, roses, violets. Now, the reason I can do that is I know a lot about flowers, right? So I could say to you, this one should be in the shade. This one should be in the sun. This one, you need to wear gloves if you're going to pick it, and this one you don't. So there's a lot to know about it, and I can advise you after I see what you have, what to do with this. Now, let's say you have some 5-year-old kid come into your garden. He's going to perceive exactly the same thing that I perceive. But all he can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice. That's all he knows. Okay. Now, most people, and I mean adults, are like that kid when it comes to human beings. They don't know what they're looking at. That's why more than 50% of the people in the United States are not married. And of the people who are married, more than 50% of them are divorced. Okay? Because they don't have this data. So they're going to make mistakes. They don't know what they're getting themselves into. So
you could say the same, Jim, for businesses and the failure rate of businesses, where 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years, 2 years, whatever. It's the same thing.
Yes, exactly.
They don't know what they're looking at.
Yes. When you look at the scale of management, I give you the 7 ineluctable components of managing anything. Okay? And if you're missing one of those, you're going to crash. You have to have all 7 of them, and they're in a sequence. They follow an order, which is logical. So it's very user-friendly stuff.
Yeah, love it.
It's awesome.
I think that's probably a good place to wrap, Aaron.
Awesome.
Jim, really, we could go for I think you did such a body of work. You did a really good job of giving us a frame for us to go now want to go read the book. I now want to go read the book. So well done. Aaron, what else?
Yeah, Jim, everything Chris said. And if people want to get in touch with you directly, we'll put that in the notes. And obviously the book will link to Amazon and make sure people get access to that. Anything else you want people to know about you or where you are, or any other ways for people to contact you, or anything else you want to say to people before we?
Well, I want to invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, where you can see what many readers have said, what many journalists have written, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself, or you can listen to a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics, which explains it in 15 minutes to a new person.
Fabulous.
Nice.
It's great.
Awesome.
All right, well, we'll put that link in the notes, and that'll go out in the newsletter as well. for people that are watching this in the newsletter. If that's the first time you're getting this, the link is below. And
Awesome.
if the podcast is valuable for y'all, then we want you to subscribe, leave us a review, right? CFG, right? Leave us a review, share it with people, and we really appreciate, Jim. We can't thank you enough for the time for being here today. It's been a really enlightening opportunity to get into a whole new world around the organization of human beings. So appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, fellas. It was fun.